The chain clinked against the dry wagon hitch, a whisper of iron on iron barely louder than the wind skimming the desert floor. The woman walked behind the creaking wagon like a ghost tethered to her own past. Dust clung to her skin, caked in her hair, and stained her dress the color of old wounds. She did not bow her head. She watched the horizon with eyes that burned like dusk. The wagon lurched. Her ankle twisted slightly. The iron collar at her neck bit deeper. They hadn't spoken to her in over a day. 5 men rode or walked beside the wagon, boots crunching in gravel, voices low, all of them pretending she was not there. One spat occasionally, chewing a bitter plug of tobacco. Another hummed tunelessly to the rhythm of the horse's hooves. The leader, a man with a thick belt and thin eyes, rode just ahead, keeping his back always to her. He'd offered her marriage 2 weeks ago. It wasn't love. It was ownership disguised with a ring. She'd told him no, loudly. And so he'd chained her. Should have been grateful. One of them muttered that first night. Better than rot. Better than the mines. The others nodded like they were men of mercy. She'd not spoken since. The boy was the only one who looked at her. Maybe 16, skin the color of faded copper, with hair he kept shaved short and eyes like storm clouds. He rode in silence, too, never smiled, never laughed. Sometimes their eyes met, his guarded, hers defiant, and nothing was said. Nothing needed to be. They traveled west, toward no town she knew, just the land stretching forever, raw and sharp like a blade left to rust. In the evenings, they'd set camp. The men would eat, joke, argue, curse at the fire. She'd be chained to a wheel. Sometimes they gave her a bowl. Sometimes not. One night, one of the men tossed a bone toward her feet. She left it untouched until morning. Let the ants claim it. Her silence unnerved them. That night, the coyotes sang too early. The wind picked up, howling like some widow mourning on the ridgeline. The leader looked toward the hills and spit. Damn country's cursed, he muttered, stoking the fire higher. She listened to the wind like it was language. A lullaby sung by something old and angry. In her dreams, her mother spoke in whispers, mixing herbs in a bowl, holding her small hand over flame and sang, "What they take with iron, child, you steal back with flame or silence." She woke with ash on her tongue. The land grew harsher each day. Water scarcer. Tempers shorter. The wagon groaned louder, its wheels chewing up the gravel like broken teeth. Once, it struck a rise and stalled. She was yanked forward, throat choked against the collar until her knees slammed dirt. None helped. The boy watched. That was all. She did not cry. She did not scream. Only once did her voice rise. When one of the men, young, red-faced, always drunk, came too close one night. His shadow fell across her sleeping form, hand fumbling at his belt. She kicked him hard in the shin and spat blood from her bitten cheek into his eye. The others dragged him back, not for her sake, but to keep order. The leader said nothing. The boy never looked away. The next morning, the chain was shortened. She walked closer to the wagon now, the heat from its wheels singeing her skin. Up on the ridge, just past the sharp bend of rock, a rider sat astride a black horse. Unmoving. Watching. A shape against the sky, lean and weather-bitten. The men didn't notice.
She did.
Only a glimpse before the horse turned and vanished. It did not feel like rescue. It felt like witness. She counted her steps. She counted the clouds. She remembered how her mother once held a dying man's hand and said, "We are all stories. But some chains can make even a god forget their own name." At midday, the boy's horse stumbled. He slipped from the saddle and gashed his calf on a rock. Blood painted the dust dark. The men cursed him for the delay. Without asking, she knelt beside him, tore a strip from her skirt, and wrapped his leg tight. Her hands were quick, firm, practiced. He winced but didn't speak. She met his eyes only once and then rose, returning to her chain without a word. That night, he brought her a tin cup of water, set it beside her, and left. She drank slowly, not for thanks, but because her throat burned like salt. The man she refused marriage passed by her on his way to sleep. He didn't speak either, but he looked at her like she was something he'd already buried. The next morning, the sun rose in silence. No birds. No wind. The wagon did not move. Instead, the leader gathered the men. Low voices. The boy wasn't invited. They spoke in pieces she could hear. El Toro sell her fetch more if she's cleaned up. The boy heard, though, from his place near the edge, where the horses drank. She saw his knuckles tighten, saw his eyes flick to hers. That night, when the others drank and one played a harmonica off-key by the fire, the boy came again. This time he didn't bring water. He knelt by her, quietly, carefully. From under his shirt he pulled something wrapped in cloth. A knife. He didn't speak. Just set it beside her leg, eyes scanning the camp to make sure no one saw. Her fingers hovered over it. But she didn't reach. Not yet. He stayed there a moment longer, then stood and walked away, fading into the shadow of the wagon's far side. She didn't sleep. The knife sat by her hip like a sleeping animal, waiting to be fed. The stars overhead were cruel and countless. Somewhere out beyond the next ridge, a horse's hoof shifted on rock. She imagined the Black Rider again, unseen now. Maybe still watching. Maybe not. The chain hummed with the wind, and she listened, very carefully, as the land began to whisper back. By the third day, without clean water, the land itself began to protest. Cracks opened like wounds across the trail. The wagon wobbled, splinters shivering from its axles, and the sun turned skin to parchment. The woman walked in silence, still chained, still upright. Dust caked in the lines of her jaw, and her lips split when she swallowed, but she held herself with the same unbending spine that had refused a man's proposal and invited punishment instead. The boy kept riding close. Too close for comfort, too quiet for accident. He didn't speak, not even when the wind picked up in long sighs across the plains. His leg, bound with her cloth, was healing well. He no longer limped when he dismounted, though he now walked as if each step carried a question. The men frayed faster than the wagon. The young drunk, still bitter from her boot to his shin, muttered to himself constantly. The one with the scorched hat and nervous laugh had begun scratching at a spot behind his ear until it bled. The leader grew colder, voice clipped, eyes rimmed with suspicion. He'd seen the way the boy looked at her. He knew chains held only so long before something snapped. At night, the wind howled across the plain like a warning. The fire crackled. She sat by the wheel, pretending to sleep, though her fingers toyed silently with a knife hidden beneath her skirt hem. The boy hadn't spoken since giving it to her. He hadn't needed to. His silence said what his mouth feared. They're not taking you to a town, they're taking you to an ending. She didn't plan escape. Not yet. She watched. She waited. A predator in irons. The next morning, they came upon the carcass of a horse bloated and buzzing with flies. Its ribs stretched like fingers. A gunshot hole marked the skull. One of the men swore. Another crossed himself. The leader ordered a detour, pushing them north into hillier land. It was slower, harder on the wheels and on her feet. A wheel caught in a rut mid-afternoon. The wagon tilted. The chain jerked. Her knees slammed rock. One of the men laughed. Another threw her a water skin, nearly empty. She took it, drank slow, then tossed it back without thanks. The boy knelt by the stuck wheel. She saw him press something into the dirt. Not a tool. A mark. A line crossed with a dot. Tribal, maybe, or personal. She recognized it. Not the meaning but the shape. It was carved into a tree outside the place she was born. A place they'd burned down when she was still learning how to mix healing roots with boiled pine. At nightfall, the sky cracked with heat lightning. No thunder. Just streaks of white tearing the dark in silence. A storm was near, but not yet falling. The men argued about how far they were from El Toro. The leader insisted they'd reach it in 2 days. The others looked doubtful. Even the horses seemed nervous. The woman knew storms like this. They came quick, hit harder than fists, and washed away more than dust. That night, she dreamt of the fire again, the one her mother danced around, chanting to the old gods. She was telling a story, how wolves hunt in silence, but their eyes never blink. She taught her daughter to watch men the same way. When she woke, the boy was crouched by the fire, tossing twigs in like prayers. He didn't look at her, but his hand rested lightly on the rifle beside him. Not the first time she'd seen it. But tonight, something in his posture shifted. He looked ready. She tested the knife's edge after the others slept. Not sharp enough for bone, but for rope, for cloth, for flesh, yes. The storm broke at dawn. Wind first, tearing through the scrub like it was paper. Then rain, sudden and cruel. The men scrambled. The horses bucked. The wagon groaned, wheels churning into mud. The chain pulled taut. She stumbled, went down, then rose again without help. The boy reached her. He didn't say a word, just pressed something into her hand. A small cloth bag. Herbs, dry and wrapped in twine. For wounds. For pain. His eyes held a question. She gave him no answer. Only a look that meant, I won't forget this. By midday, the storm passed, but the damage lingered. One of the men had a twisted ankle. The wagon leaned right. The trail ahead was worse. Rocks like broken teeth, hills thick with thorn brush. The leader cursed loudly, blaming the map, the horses, the wind, anything but himself. That night, the woman knelt by the fire to stir ashes. No one stopped her. They were too tired, too afraid. She pressed a small pinch of the herbs into a corner of the fire pit and whispered her mother's name. The boy sat nearby, eyes wide. He knew a ritual when he saw one. Knew power, too, not from bullets, but from memory. She didn't tell him what it meant. Let him wonder. Let them all. The next morning, she woke to voices. Urgent. Angry. They're watching us, the leader snapped. Don't pretend you haven't seen it. One of the men, the one who scratched his ear, nodded fast. Saw a rider on the ridge yesterday. Again today. Same one, I swear it. The woman's pulse quickened. The chain rattled as she sat straighter. The leader spat. Could be bounty. Could be a scout. Could be looking for her. He turned toward her, eyes narrow. You know him? She didn't answer. Look at me when I speak. Still silent. He stepped close. Backhanded her. Hard. Her lips split. The boy flinched, but didn't move. Later, when the others were packing, the boy came to her side. Eyes hard. They're scared now, he whispered, voice low enough to vanish into the wind. That rider's not just watching. He's following. She didn't ask how he knew. She believed him. That night, she didn't sleep. The boy stayed near, rifle across his knees. The chain sat quiet beside her, gleaming faintly in firelight. The knife under her dress felt warmer now, like it had waited long enough. A decision was forming. Not yet taken, but close. She glanced once toward the hills. If the rider was out there, he hadn't made himself known. But something had changed. The chain no longer felt like fate. It felt like a fuse. The rider came down from the ridge at twilight. He did not shout. He did not announce himself. Just a silhouette against the sinking sun, black horse slow and sure, hooves silent over shale. The men froze mid-bite, stew spoons trembling. The fire crackled between them, throwing sparks toward the sky like nervous prayers. The woman sat unmoving, chained to the wagon wheel, but her eyes locked onto the rider like she'd summoned him from stone. The leader stood, hand on his gun, voice tight. You lost, friend. The rider said nothing, just eased his horse closer until the firelight caught his face, scarred cheek, weather-worn skin, eyes like river rock. No insignia, no badge, just a coat bleached pale by sun and dust, sleeves patched with leather and time. I asked you something, the leader snapped, stepping forward now, boots heavy. Don't make me ask twice. The rider's gaze slid past him to the wagon, to the woman in chains, to the boy who sat nearest her, barely breathing. And then, quiet, dry, like gravel rubbed together, he spoke. That woman with you? She's property. The drunk said, too quick. Prisoner. El Toro bound. The rider dismounted in one smooth motion. Loose the reins and let the horse wander. No weapon drawn. Not yet. She don't look like no prisoner I ever seen, he said. The leader's eyes narrowed. What are you, a lawman?
No.
Then turn around. You're not welcome here. Wind passed between them, stirring the coals, shifting the smoke. The boy's hand inched toward his rifle. His eyes flicked to the woman. She gave a nearly invisible nod. The rider took a step forward. I'm not here for you, he said, voice lower now, dangerous. I'm here for her. Steel rasped. One of the men drew. In the next heartbeat, the rider moved. Not with fury, but with precision. A flash of silver, a single shot, and the man's gun hand snapped back with a cry. Blood sprayed the fire. Horses screamed. The camp exploded into motion. The woman rolled left, chain dragging, and in one smooth motion drew the knife from beneath her skirt. The boy was already on his feet, rifle up, aimed not at the rider, but at the leader. For a long second no one moved. Smoke swirled. The wounded man groaned, clutching his wrist. The drunk had vanished behind the wagon. The others stood frozen, waiting for someone else to decide what this moment would be. The leader sneered. You siding with her? He asked the boy, his voice poison-sweet. You think she'll take you with her? You're nothing. Just a stray. The boy's rifle didn't waver. I know what I am. You're the one who forgets what chains do to a person. The woman rose slowly, knife in hand, collar biting her throat. Let me go, she said. First words she'd spoken in days. They fell like thunder. The leader's face tightened. You're not going anywhere. The rider's voice cut through the tension. Let her go, and no one else gets hurt. She belongs to us. No, the rider said. She never did. Then the storm broke.
Gunfire.
Thunder of boots. The drunk popped up from behind the wagon with a shotgun, fired wild. The boy ducked, rolled, returned fire. The woman dropped flat as a bullet whistled overhead. She slashed at the chain, metal sparking.
Too thick.
The lock. She needed the lock. The rider moved like water down a cliff, graceful, inevitable. 2 more shots. 2 more screams. The drunk went down. Another fled. The leader lunged for the boy. Too slow. The woman was already moving, knife reversed in her hand. She struck the leader low, just beneath the ribs. Not deep, not fatal. But enough. He staggered. The boy brought his rifle up, aimed at the man's skull. His hands trembled. Don't, the woman said. That ain't your burden. He froze, breath ragged, then lowered the rifle. The rider tossed something across the fire.
A key.
It landed beside her feet, still warm from his pocket. She snatched it, shoved it into the lock.
Click.
The collar fell. She stood, taller now, blood on her dress, face calm as stone. The leader coughed, sank to his knees, eyes wide with disbelief. You'll die out there, he rasped. You got no home. She stepped past him. Neither do you. The last man standing ran. No one followed. Silence bloomed. The boy wiped his face with a shaking hand, then looked at her like he wasn't sure if she was real. The rider stepped close, holstering his gun. His eyes searched hers for something, recognition, perhaps, or permission. I came when I could, he said. She nodded. That was enough. He reached into his coat and offered her a necklace. Simple leather thong with a carved bone pendant. She took it wordlessly, fingers tracing the shape, an old sigil, half remembered from childhood, when her mother whispered of spirits that crossed plains on moonlight. The rider turned to the boy. You coming? The boy looked at the woman. Waited. She nodded again. They gathered what they could. Left the rest. The fire burned low. Behind them, the wounded moaned. No one offered mercy. Mercy had to be earned. They walked into the dark together. Woman, boy, rider. No chains. No master. Only miles of silence waiting to be filled. Above them, the sky stretched endless, a canvas of stars brushed clean by violence. The land exhaled. Something old, something quiet, something free. and the trail behind them vanished in the wind. They didn't ride toward safety. They rode toward reckoning. 3 figures, the woman, the boy, the rider, etched black against the dawn. Their horses moved in silence, save for the creak of worn leather and the occasional snort of dust-weary breath. The plains opened like an old wound, familiar and unforgiving. The woman rode without saddle, thighs tight to the mare's flanks, her knife strapped across her thigh. The boy rode behind the rider for a time, quiet, until he earned a mount of his own. Then he rode beside the woman, glancing at her like she was more myth than mortal. They spoke little. The land did the talking. The rider knew where he was going, but he didn't rush. They followed dry riverbeds, past the blackened remains of homesteads swallowed by wind and time. Once, they found a shack with feathers strung over the door and dried corn nailed to the beams. The rider bowed before entering. The woman did the same. The boy watched, then followed suit. Inside, they found shelter and silence. No ghosts, just memories. By the 5th night, they neared the borderlands, places with no law, just names carved into stone and blood. The woman knew these ridges. She remembered them from stories told in twilight, when her mother spoke of their people fleeing east, carrying babies in baskets and songs in their throats. Now, only the bones of that exodus remained, hidden, forgotten, or buried too deep. They camped by a creek swollen with storm water. The rider finally spoke of what waited ahead. El Toro's not where they said it was, he told her. It's moved, became something else. Built higher walls. New lawmen. New gallows. The woman met his gaze. And the man? He's there. Rich now. Owns a bank, some cattle. Got friends with silver stars and quick tempers. The boy, cleaning his rifle, looked up. That the man who chained her? The rider hesitated.
No.
The man who sold her. The fire snapped between them. The woman didn't flinch. Her voice came low. He took my mother's land. Called it a fair trade. Took my sister too, when I wouldn't marry. The boy looked from her to the rider. So, what are we doing? The woman leaned forward, face lit orange by flame. Finishing the story. The rider nodded. And, making sure it don't happen again. The next day, they rode into El Toro. It wasn't a town. It was a fortress of greed, stone buildings with iron bars, whitewashed facades masking rot. Men with guns watched from rooftops, all uniform and eyes without warmth. The townsfolk moved like shadows, quick, cautious, afraid of being seen too long. They split at the edge of town. The rider went to stir the dust, spread rumors. The boy went to listen. The woman? She went straight to the center. No disguise. No cowardice. The banker's building was clean, tall, smug with stained glass and polished wood. She pushed through the doors like smoke, quiet but choking. The man behind the desk looked up, face aged but familiar. A moment passed before recognition set in.
He stood, paled.
You. She stepped forward.
Me.
Guards, he shouted, but the doors didn't open. The boy stood outside, rifle aimed at the lock. No one dared test him. Inside, the woman moved closer. I'm not here for money. I'm not here to scream. He backed against the wall. Whatever they told you, You sold my name, she said. Sold my sister. Sold the land my mother bled on. I did what the law allowed. Then the law's wrong. The rider entered then, calm as dusk. He closed the door behind him. We came to see if you'd answer for it, he said. The banker's breath was shallow. This is murder. No, the woman said. This is mercy. She handed the rider a folded paper, an old deed, burned around the edges, but still legible. Her mother's mark was at the bottom. You forged this to claim it, she said. But it's not yours. The rider tossed it onto the banker's desk. We filed a claim yesterday. Land Bureau's gone federal now. Real law, real proof. They'll come soon enough. The banker's voice cracked. You don't know who I am. I know exactly, the woman whispered. I've worn your chain. And then she turned and walked out. The rider didn't follow. Not yet. Inside, The banker sat alone in a room that suddenly felt too small. Outside, the boy smiled. You didn't kill him. Not yet, she said. Then softer. Justice don't always wear a bullet. They rode back out before the sun touched its peak. No one followed. In the hills that night, they burned the chain, set it in a fire pit and fed it dry sage and cedar. It glowed, hissed, twisted in the heat like it wanted to live.
But it died slow.
When the metal cracked in two, the woman let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. The boy asked if they were done. The woman looked at the horizon. With him?
Yes.
With the world? Not yet. The rider placed something beside the fire, a worn map, edges curled. Land that used to be hers is free now. Yours if you want it. Might take a year to build a home. Might take 10. But it's yours. She didn't answer, just stared at the fire a while longer. Then she turned to the boy. You still want to ride? He grinned. As long as we're riding forward. She looked at the rider. And you? He tipped his hat. I'm not the staying kind. She nodded once. They left the ashes where they lay. Morning rose over the ridges, soft gold and pink. A different light than the one they'd left behind. The wind whispered through the brush, not empty now, but full of promise. They rode 3 abreast. No master, no chains. Just 3 souls stitched together by fire, grit, and choice. And somewhere behind them, a banker locked his doors tighter. But the story wasn't his anymore. It belonged to the woman who wouldn't kneel,